Yeah, so first question is, what's the change you want to create in the system that you're trying to change? And what is that system?
Okay, so the system we operate in is huge. It's almost undefined in that we're looking to see how we can find better ways of addressing big social challenges. That's multiple systems that interact. The change we want to see is we just have a fundamental belief that we can find better ways of addressing some of these persistent social challenges. And the change we want to see is beginning to demonstrate some of that potential, and then start realising some of the different ways of how these systems work.
So the system could be across different social issues, and then
yeah. So in fact, that's one of the real challenges we have is that technology has been applied to so many different settings. It's changed the way in which markets operate. It's changed the way in which high streets work. It's changed the way in which we communicate. The way in which we use technology has changed those things. Technology just change how we learn, just change education. It's much broader than that. We want to see more. The ultimate question for us is how do the affordances of technology meet the characteristics of social challenges? So that means where can technology play the greatest role in addressing the social challenges we're looking to address? And that might be across any social area, it might be any social system.
And so sort of linked to that, what is your theory of change?
We have a huge theory of change. So at Nominate Trust we support ventures and organisations who are trying to use technology to address social issues. Our broad theory of change is we need to find and support lots and lots of new ideas that are demonstrating potential for the role of technology. Once we've had lots and lots of those, we begin to highlight the ones which have the greatest potential. At that point, we begin to demonstrate some of that potential. That's quite a long time period already. That's probably kind of 2 years worth of work. And then we look to see how we can help those move them from demonstrating potential to start realising some of that potential and some of the social value. So essentially it's looking at a whole range of organisations, seeing where we can best support them, some of which will be supported to interact with an existing system. Some of them will be about creating new systems around them. And that's where it becomes particularly difficult.
Creating the new systems as well?
Yeah, well, I think systems innovation is really difficult to design for, and it's really difficult to engineer for. It's relatively simple as a research task to look back and see how systems have changed or how they've been formed. But when you're trying to create a new way of addressing a challenge, sometimes you want to use the existing kind of momentum of the system, and sometimes you want to get rid of it.
And can you talk about something you know as an example of systems change in action?
Designed for?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's designed for and not designed for.
So I think retrospectively we can look at lots of changes and go, wow, there are so many important parts that have led to this change. I think from the stuff I've read about, the closest example of a designed for systems change is the use of radar, which isn't the most exciting. Well, it's very important, I'm sure, but it's not the most important thing for me. I really struggle because systems are inherently complex, and one of the things we often miss with systems, trying to think about systems change, is perspective. So if you think about what an education system looks like, that should be quite easy. We all know what the education system looks like. But if you look at an education system from the perspective of a 6-year-old, it's very, very different from that from someone who sits in Whitehall. And the relationships you have with the system that should be the same thing, surely, is completely different. So the short answer is radar or not really.
Nobody's been able to come up with an example, which I think.
How do you? So if your understanding of a system is a large number of conflicting and interlocking and supportive parts working towards a shared end, designing that, which is really complex, you're trying to get rid of the complexity. If you want to design something to create a system change, and I think that's almost impossible. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying all the time and being aware of the other things that are going on as we try and develop our own part of the work. But trying to design something for systems change is different from designing something with systems change in mind. That's quite an important distinction, I think.
That's a very good distinction, because Indy talks a lot about systems consciousness. And so it's just about making people more conscious of that way of thinking rather than that you can actually design for it.
I think that's a really good point. And part of that is working at how other people's actions interact with what you're trying to do. it comes down to whether you think you have some whole ownership of the effect that you're creating, or whether you think there are other things that you take account of. And where you can, you want to form all sorts of formal and informal links. Informal links are probably more important, but sometimes formal collaboration, sometimes trying to design things together. Very often that awareness is a really important part of it.
And so because, like you say, it's actually just very complex, and does that still mean that it's important for you and your teams to have, do you have like a vision, or is that just something that you're constantly revisiting, or how important is it to even have one?
I think it's really important. So we have a vision for the role we think technology can play and the way in which we think we can use technology to address some of these challenges. And we want to demonstrate that vision and make sure it's true and test it out. And I think then we have kind of slightly smaller visions based around particular projects or particular kind of ventures we're involved in. And that's where you get more specific, I suppose, where you have a great partner who's got a great idea, and then you're trying to help them put that into practice, and that way you have to take account of more specifically the kind of the system they're involved in. And that's so that vision's a kind of more, it's a subset of the overall ambition we have.
And how do you like write that down somewhere? Like, do you have it drawn up? Like, what does the vision look like for the team, and how do you work with that?
It's a great question. So we have our vision that's on our website, and it's something we keep on returning to. In fact, we returned to it yesterday in a really great meeting, and we still generally believe that there's a role for technology in addressing some of these challenges. Perhaps we should make more of it, but it's certainly something we start off most. In fact, we start off, I think, every presentation with our mission, which is a subset of our vision. It's how we begin to achieve our vision as the first slide, and that's us. That's what we believe, and we're going to try and use all the resources we have available to achieve that. Maybe we need to keep on returning to it more often.
And what about the sort of tactics and strategies that you use to have the kind of impact that you want to have?
Yeah, so we operate something called development research, which is about using all research, all evaluation, all insights, other people's research to inform how we develop what we do. So the whole purpose of our work is trying to improve the way in which we operate. So we're in a really fortunate position that each year we get to invest around about £5 million from Notnet in social causes, which is amazing. But the only way we can do that effectively is if we keep on using every further investment and all the other research to inform what we do. So that's kind of that's kind of one overarching method or principle, I guess. Through that, we then developed our model of change with where we think we best sit, based on the resources we have. So we think that there are all sorts of things that have to happen to achieve the kind of vision we have, but we recognise that we can only play a small part of it. So we focus on where our internal resources and where our funding resources best fit in that model of change, which means we stretch mostly along supporting kind of seed stage ideas, where we get to support about 40 or 50 per year. We support others to then do things below that, because they're earlier stage ventures where it's outside of our skill set. And then there's a smaller number we look to support further until they kind of grow significant scale. But it's about identifying, as with most businesses and organisations, where your internal resources and your other resources you have best fit to help you impact that overall vision.
And what about your allies and sort of partners? Who are they, and how does that work?
There are loads of it. So it's really, in some ways, we're quite a unique organisation in that we start off with providing funding around the use of technology, which means that whereas most funders will start off with a social objective in mind. So that means we have lots of partners who are focused on social objectives. So we have kind of two sorts of relationships with those. One is we match fund and we share expertise with them. The other is we try to help them understand the role of technology. So we have a whole range of partners like that, and they might be big funders like Comic Relief, who we do lots of work with. It might be Cabinet Office and others. Then also work with more progressive funders, those who are focused more on innovation or technology. The good people at Nesta, as you know, we do quite a lot of work with them. But I guess the main kind of set of partners we have are those who are bringing us propositions and ideas. And that really ranges from existing charities who are beginning to use technology through to tech entrepreneurs who are beginning to think about how they can use their skills to address social issues. And then somewhere in the middle, we have this kind of wonderful group of social tech entrepreneurs who are kind of directly aligned with our vision.
What do you feel less sure of? So, that honestly, what do you feel less sure of?
All of my previous answers. No, this is really complex, right? So the reason we have this development research approach is we have a set of assumptions of how Normal Net Trust can best achieve this vision. And every few months, every 6 months, every year, we're testing those assumptions. So all the answers I've given you are things that I currently believe. In 6 months' time, after I've read something else, after I've seen something else, then hopefully that will twist it slightly. I would love it if at the end of this process you can explain to me how we can design systems innovation. I would love to be I would love to change my expectations around that. But what is there anything particular I'm not sure of? I suppose I'm still fascinated in how social tech organisations progress and develop. And so far we've seen lots that do quite well and you begin to achieve some significant social value, but we haven't seen anything of the like that's revolutionised a market or revolutionised a sector. Do I think it can happen? I really hope it can. I really hope that we can help make it happen. But I would love to be able to evidence that next time we speak.
Okay. That's all the work he really was.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Can I grab a swig?
Yeah. You're very quick and succinct. It's great.
I think everyone else on my team would describe me as waffly.
No, you're very concise.
Do you want me to stop being concise? Shall I waffle some more?
No, I'm going to just try and think of a few to catch you out. No.
Yeah, no, do it.
Because that's what the reason I asked that, what are you less sure of, is Nick Stanhope sort of said after his, he's very used to saying the narrative of what he does. Yeah. But actually, the reality is he hasn't got a clue what he's doing really.
Yeah, I know.
And I know I think that's true for all of us doing anything around this area.
So one of the things we talk about, in fact, from the meeting we were last in, is about this ridiculously named triple helix of social tech innovation, social tech ventures, about proving or demonstrating your assumptions around your economic views and social value. And that's the same for us. I think organisations that think they know exactly what they're doing in such a complex space are overconfident or lying, perhaps, I don't know. But certainly for us, this is our best assertion at the moment. And I hope it changes, because if it doesn't, it means we're probably not learning enough.
So that sort of links nicely into a question about you more personally then. You know, what do you need to keep doing what you're doing? What do you need to keep going in this space?
Can you rephrase it in terms of what do you mean to keep me motivated? Or
yeah, like it's an uncertain, messy world.
Yeah, it is.
And it's like constantly swimming upstream in some ways. Yeah. So what is it for you that keeps you going, the momentum?
It's just so important. We have these ridiculous social challenges that we haven't yet been able to resolve. And they persist and they get worse year on year, and yet we see dramatic changes in other parts of our lives. And surely with the sorts of thinking that goes into designing amazing search engines or amazing ways to advertise, and the sorts of technology we have that can link people across the globe, surely we should be able to find a way of addressing some of these issues. And even if it's just addressing the issues for some of the people that are currently struggling, which means we can focus other resources on others in another way, that's fine. But just surely, it's a kind of a desperation thing, really. We must be able to find something.
And so then, maybe need is the wrong word, but you've obviously got a very strong sense of why it's important for you, and in some ways it's not even, like you say, it's not even a question, it's just it has to happen. But like, just what do you feel you need as someone leading some of the things in that space that you need in terms of support, team, looking after yourself, and that, how do you keep going?
So it's mixing with other people who are passionate about this stuff. So again, I guess I'm in a relatively, I'm in a very fortunate position that I work at an organisation that helps other organisations. We have funding to do that, and being able to talk with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs who are so enthusiastic, that motivates me to think about what I'm doing. And conversely, talking with people who have got great ideas, who are really passionate, who we can't help, also motivates me, because standing in front of someone saying, your idea is really great, but we're not going to give you any money, is difficult, because it's a way of saying, it's a way of making a judgment about what they're doing. And sometimes it isn't that, sometimes it's just a line of directions or whatever. But having to say no to people, as much as having great conversations with people we're able to support, very much keeps me focused on what we do. So a lot of the work we do is around networks and individuals and people getting together, rather than more formal kind of collaborations and organisations working together necessarily. And being able to, well, I guess taking a lead from the sorts of stuff that you do, and being able to talk to people who are desperately seeking solutions and who have different parts of the puzzle is another thing that it just reinforces what you're trying to do and what your role can be, and then also helps kind of shift what you're trying to do. But those kind of personal relationships as part of a professional organisational role are absolutely key.
Because quite a few people have spoken about, use the word persistence, and I guess that is something that everyone's got in common, I think, in terms of you just have to keep going. And
So one of the big revisions or recognitions we've had over the last few years about our model of change is just how stretched out it needs to be over time. And the fabled rise of overnight successes in the tech world, which are probably untrue anyway, certainly haven't happened in the social tech world. And it is persistent, and it's really difficult from even from an own organisation to be reporting on lots of startups when we want to be reporting on significant social change. And it's patience and impatience kind of balanced at the appropriate times, and I think persistence is really important.
And so 2 more questions. How do you sort of define or find the problems that you're wanting to address?
So the overarching question that we're looking to address, that I mentioned earlier, is what's the relationship between the affordances of technology, the way in which we can use it, the properties of things that we can design, and the characteristics of social challenges. And so we start off by saying, how could tech be used for social good? It's kind of broad. And what we're trying to do is narrow it and narrow it and narrow it until we know what the overlap is. So for example, one that's really useful and we've got a kind of new fund around is life transitions. Because we know that when people go through moments of transition, whether it be leaving school or becoming unemployed or going into a care home, at those times you often need to make way into new communities, you need to access new information, and very often you need new support. And we know that those 3 things really relate to some of the affordances of technology. It's very easy to access new information, it's very easy to access new online communities, and it's very easy to access support in new ways. Now those 3 things mean there should be quite an alignment between how we can use technology to address people through moments of transition. So that's the way in which we begin to identify the challenges. We started with kind of a broad area, and we try to understand where those linkages are. The more specific we can be, hopefully, the more direct we can be about how we address it.
And lastly, there's 2 more. Who or what inspires you?
Wow, I'm constantly inspired by the people we work with, without a doubt, by the things they're trying to do, by their approach, by their creativity, by their madcap inventiveness. I'm inspired by my team because they continually challenge me and push me. And I'm weirdly inspired by how very fortunate I am. And when I think about the sorts of things I do for a day job and the things I'm trying to address, and then think about how lucky I am when I go home and close the door, it makes me want to go out and do even more.
And how do you describe what you do to people who are not in our...
My favourite description so far was when I described what I did to a taxi driver, and his response was, "Oh, you're like a dragon from Dragon's Den, but with someone else's money." Which starts off with, okay, that's quite a nice assumption. I would hope, though, that I'm slightly more involved in helping people develop and solve some of the problems they're trying to address. But there's the kind of the traditional funding role, but I hope the development research piece comes through, which is about, how do I describe that? It's about using everything we can to improve the way in which we act.
And lastly, what do you think we should do with this content? which is quite hard when you don't actually know what it is.
Yeah. So how would the answers that I've given help anybody? I'm not sure, but when they're kind of together, so that there's some. I hope I hope there's something inspirational about kind of the commitment that other people are showing in this sort of stuff, and how whether you're in a traditional funding organisation, a policy organisation, or whether you've got your own startup, you're trying to achieve something similar. I think that's really important. And in some ways, for me, that's the way in which systems innovation may well be designed. It's just lots of people with similar beliefs and similar passions working together, even if it's informally. So there's something about how it can be brought together that way to kind of demonstrate what people are trying to do. Is there something about... I would love to work towards how do you begin to design for systems innovation? And even if it's just unpicking some principles like being aware of systems or being open about what you're trying to do and being open about the challenges you're facing, then maybe this sort of content can help people realise that.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Is there anything else that you wish we'd asked you? That's always hard.
No, do you know what? No, I don't think so. I came here without any kind of real preconceptions.
When you're less busy and but you should meet up with Jenny
Yeah.
Winhall, because
Okay.
I don't know if I believe you can design for systems change either.
Right.
But if anyone
Anyone
has
can.
got the brain, who's thought, I mean, if you've worked at Participle for that long,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she is the brain, I think,
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
organisation, what she's planning to do next is create a systems change lab.
Wow. Okay.
Where she's got ideas of how you might design for systems change around this kind of coming at it from all angles at different points of the system at the same time.
So my challenge, I think that's brilliant. So my challenge to that would be, how do you coordinate the different, coming from different angles? And also, how do you define the system?
Yeah.
Because I think if we all sat down and just, I mean, you've got a map on the wall there that's got a description of a system. The tube map's a very different description of a system. And you've got, whoever sits down and tries to draw it up will inherently privilege some things over other things. So a policymaker's system of education is very different from a pupil's. And trying to understand how that relates to change is really difficult.
It's a good challenge to have.
Perspective on innovation is something that I think we so often miss. Anyway, I think that's for another conversation.
Well, thank you so much
It's a pleasure.
for your
Thanks,
time.
man. It's a
That was
pleasure.
very